nice to finally meet you. Can't wait to tell you about the things I've been through. 18 years, I was walking by myself. Ain't no fucking way that could be good for my health. Skeletons go deep. Been living in my closet. Fear of the unknown cause a nigga to be modest. I'm just being honest. It's hard to face the facts that I've been living all this time, not knowing what it mean to be black. Grew up, ain't have no father, just my mother. Her and Graham's the only ones at supper. So many fucking questions, things to discover. Why these white kids always questioning my color? Start to make me wonder, who the hell am I? Why they got me feeling like my brown skin is my demise? You can see it in my eyes, confusion run deep. Start to lose trust, can't tell a wolf from a sheep. Inside the tears leak, can't show it on the surface. Was just a little kid trying to understand his purpose. Tears turned to rage, on fear I turned the page. Smoked my first L, now I'm coping with the haze. Why the value of my life under appraise? Just cause my skin dark. Why the 5 o'clock news only show niggas in chalk? Why I can't just be myself? Always gotta play the part like, boy, you black, you ain't supposed to be smart. Nigga, dead black man, it's nice to finally meet you. Can't wait to tell you about the things I've been through. 18 years, I was walking by myself. Ain't no fucking way that could be good for my health. Skeletons go deep. Been living in my closet. Fear of the unknown cause a nigga to be modest. I'm just being honest. It's hard to face the facts that I've been living all this time, not knowing what it mean to be black.
So, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Jason Clemons.
What do you do for a living, Jason?
I'm a hairdresser of 36 years, an educator for about 25 years, and a salon owner here in Olean, New York.
Just in your career path, what was that like?
It's a little challenging, thinking about being black in a profession that is dominated by white females, and in the educator position, there's not a lot of top black males teaching at a high level, and it's just because that's how the industry goes.
So what was your experience growing up as a black man?
Growing up, it was pretty evident that early on that I realized that I was black because I had an afro. I grew up in the 1970s, and my father was a product of the Vietnam War. Not a product of, but he went to the Vietnam War at 17 years old, and came back, and they were really mistreated as veterans, and especially as black veterans. So it was pretty evident early on that I was going to grow up in a culture that disliked me at times, and didn't give me the benefit of the doubt most of the time. So I had to fight a lot.
Expand upon the fight. What does that entail? Like, are you talking physically, metaphorically?
Fighting for me it started out metaphorically because I had to understand what being black meant. I mean, half of my family was black and half of my family was white. So, growing up, when I went to my white side of my family's homes, I would be called the cool cousin or the cousin that dresses nice, just because I had a little bit of fashion sense. But when I was around my black cousins, sometimes it got a little bit testy because they thought that I was a little bit more privileged because I wasn't around them on a more often basis. So it was just tough, and then it became physical when I got to school. Late in grade school, when I started to be interested in girls and things like that, I would get a lot of white dudes that would try to press on me, and they would definitely call me names that you would familiarize yourself with. Oh, that's a black thing. So it was tough. So the fighting metaphorically became physical.
So tell us about one of your earliest experiences in middle school where you realized that you were black and for some reason that meant people treated you differently.
I think one of the first experiences that I had, I was in 4th grade, and I was flirting with a girl and she was flirting with me, and it was real innocent. I mean, in 4th grade, a lot of that stuff is innocent. And I just remember one of the kids in school looked at her and called her a nigger lover. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, and my father had told me early on that if anyone calls you any type of name, you know, whether it be a derogatory name or not, you know, you got to defend yourself and make sure that you stand up for yourself. So early on, I knew that that was a time to fight for myself. And it stung. It stung real hard because I didn't look at myself as a name. I looked at myself as a person. And when I heard him call not me that, but call her an N-lover, man, it stung. And that was one of my first experiences having to get physical with somebody in 4th grade. I mean, that's pretty early on to really fight and be emotional about it. Well, I think because my father came out of the 60s, he was born in 1951, so he grew up during the civil rights movement, and then beyond the civil rights movement saw Martin Luther King be shot, John F. Kennedy being shot, and going through all those experiences, it developed him as a person, as, you know what, there's right, there's wrong, and I need to stand up for myself in all categories. And it made him hard. It made him a hard person. And and I look back now as an adult, and knowing what I know now, he had the cards stacked against him, and it was because of blackness, and it was because of the culture that we came up in. Growing up in a small area in New York, it was tough because we didn't have the city culture that a lot of people have, and you're really up against a lot of numbers when it comes to having people have your back. And he really just taught me you gotta stand up for yourself. And it was really about, you know what, you can't rely on other people to do for you. You got to do for yourself, and it sticks with me to this day.
Let's go back to that moment where you said you had to defend her. What about that scenario made you act? Because you said your father kind of taught you to defend yourself. So what about your character made you want to defend this white girl because she was called that word?
It wasn't even that I was defending her. I was defending what I perceived as the culture of black, because I knew that he wasn't mad at her. He was mad at me for being liked by her. And it just set something off that I was like, you know what, I gotta stand up for myself. And really what he's doing is calling me a nigger. He's not calling her a nigger, he's calling me a nigger, but he's saying she likes me. And this was just an innocent, flirt. It was an innocent crush. And it was the first time that someone said something to me in anger where it really stung.
How old are you now?
I am 50 years old.
No.
Yes, I am.
No, that's crazy. That's actually insane.
I turned 50 March 12th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Hey, man, black on crack.
Yeah. I got to give it to my parents. They gave me good genetics.
So, what I want to know is, what do you think was going through his mind, or what do you think his scenario was growing up that made him at such a young age be able to? Because I feel like he was just regurgitating hate from her.
Yeah, I'm sure he did, because this is a kid that I went to school with early on, and then later on in life fought him again in high school. So it was something that he was just a bully. He was one of those bullies, and I was a bully beater because I was smaller than everybody, skinnier than everybody, and I just didn't take a whole lot of mess. I was always the one that was going to defend anyone. My friends, I defended them. My girls, I defended them. Myself, I defended myself. My family, I defended my family. And it was people like him that I knew that you had to take them on where they stood. And I couldn't let him get the better of me just by it hurting.
So you said you fought him in high school. What was the story behind that?
Similar situation. We were actually in a library, and I could have been, I was probably in maybe ninth or 10th grade at the time. And same thing, you got to be quiet in the library. And he was just picking, just making snide comments, and eventually it just went down. We just had to go, and that's how it works sometimes. I'm glad I did all of that stuff back in the day, and I don't have to do it anymore. But you know, it helps to have a reputation.
What were some of the positives growing up in this community
As a black kid growing up in the community, there was always something to do. I have so many cousins in this area, and you knew that if you were black and everyone else that was black around you was your cousin. You know, and still to this day, I get people coming to the salon and they're like, yeah, Jason's my cousin. I'm like, I have no clue who that is. But it is a positive in that sense, because you can always know that you can reach out and say, I got you, I got you, I got you. You know, and there's a commonality that you can see. You know, obviously I'm half black, half white, so some black people would see that as a negative, but others just brought me in like, you know what, that's my cousin, that's my brother. You know, and most of my cousins, we call each other brothers anyways, and not in the sense where you're like, hey, what's up, brother? It's like they're really my brothers. They're more than just cousins. It goes a little bit deeper than that, because we know that we have a bond that really can't be broken, and it doesn't have to be because you're a seed of someone else. So it was a positive growing up, knowing that I had so many people that were around me that if I ever needed anything, I could truly call on.
You know, it's so crazy how so many of the stories, just from interviewing you, Jesse, and JR so far, that you all have that as one commonality that I'm seeing, versus in Buffalo, which isn't even a big city.
Right.
It's the complete opposite.
Absolutely.
The white people, I'm not gonna say they're allied, but they're a lot more scared to call you the N-word to your face.
Absolutely. It's tribalism. You know, we're all tribal in the purest form. Is in tribes have to be in small groups. So when you come from a small area, it's like most of the black people stuck together because we knew that was our tribe. When you get into a larger area, you get into a city, cities have tribes within their tribes, and that's why you see black on black crime. It's American on American crime. It's not black on black crime. It just happens to be tribes against tribes. And I mean, that happens in white neighborhoods, it happens in black neighborhoods. We just happen to have an area where it's small enough. Because I talked to you earlier, and I said I used to, you know, spend summers up on North Parade, and because I was an outsider, I got picked on there. So it was like if we played flag football or we were out wrestling, you know, it was like everyone wanted to pick on me. They wanted to jump in on me, and I'm like, you know what? I'm an outsider. I understood that, but I understood that because I grew up with that outsider mentality in a small town. So it's a positive, because now you understand where, you know, if you go out of town, I never feel uncomfortable wherever I'm at, because if I can make it here in a town where half of the community looks at you as downtrodden and you're never going to make it, I can make it anywhere. I travel all around the world, and you know, I know I look differently than everybody, and sometimes I have to catch myself in the mirror in the airport bathroom and go, oh, that's why they were staring at me. I forgot I had a 1-foot beard, you know, and it's almost like I've transcended that being something, and I've become everything. So.
Can you expand upon that?
Yeah, I think, you know, when we started this conversation, it was like, you know, what was your upbringing of being black, or how did that affect you positively or negatively? I've taken all of that experience and made it all work for me, made it all best for me. So a lot of people look at me now and say, oh, well, you don't look black. And I go, it's not about that. I never looked black. No one looks black. If you look at the average African American, nobody looks like they come straight from Africa. We're all mixed with something, and the further we go down the line, it's going to keep on getting more and more diverse. And that diversity, I've seen it from the beginning of time for me. And when I saw that coming up, I knew that I had to take advantage of all those things. So I know when someone says, "Oh, you're acting black," I just know that I'm around people that are culturally like me. It doesn't mean that I'm acting a certain way. It's just I know how to represent myself in any sort. I can be around millionaires and I can act like a millionaire. I can be around people that I grew up in the hood and I can act like I'm hood. But I'm not acting a certain way. It's all in me. So I'm able to transform in any situation. And I think that's one of the benefits of growing up in a small area. You know where you stand, so when you walk into a situation, you know that you're not just going to walk in and confront somebody just because they don't like you, because they're never going to like you.
You said something there that is so key, and I'm glad you touched on it. What is your idea of code switching?
Code switching?
Yes. Do you know what it is?
I do not.
It's honestly a derogatory term.
Yeah.
It's like saying, oh, because you're black, like, we can't be our authentic selves in every avenue. And I don't want to give you too much information on it.
No, I get it.
No,
I totally get it.
What you're saying. Because what you just said was kind of like the definition of code switching. Like how you can blend in, like you're almost like a chameleon in any situation. You can be a part of that group.
Well, I learned, growing up that you're not all of one thing. I'm part spiritual, I'm part physical, I'm part mental, I'm part educator, I'm part educatee, I'm part mentor, I'm part mentee. And anytime I touch on any of those things, I have to be able to cross those lines. And if that's called code switching and it's a bad thing, then I don't want it to be bad. I want it to be great, And I think that when you walk into a room or you walk into a building and you know what to say to a doorman, and you know what to say to the receptionist, and you know what to say to the person who's taking care of you, why does that have to be, oh, you're being white, or you're being black, or you're being professional, or you're being hood? If it's code switching, then I think code switching is a good thing.
The idea behind it is that like the white gray can't accept us for who we are. They don't like the fact that we're we have dreads. They don't like the fact that we use a lot of slang. Like, even though American culture is largely based off of black culture.
Most of it is. Most of it is.
Yeah, for sure. So with that being said, what would you say to someone younger than you who said code switching was bad? Like, how would you educate the benefits of that?
Well, I think that the easiest thing is that Carney and I were talking about it earlier. We were listening to a podcast, and on the podcast was a woman by the name of Isabel Wilkerson, who was the first Pulitzer Prize woman that happened to be black. And this just happened recently. And she was talking about, she's got a new book out called Caste. And really it talks about how the caste system in America is based on not only a economic caste, it's also a biological caste. And like the term white never came out until colonialism. There was no such thing as a white person. You were Italian, you were German, you were Irish, you were all those other things that were Northern European or European, and black was Africans. And once slavery came about, it was because they had already tried to enslave the Native Americans. They had already tried to enslave the Irish immigrants. And because those failed, because they looked too much like them, or they actually gave so much disease to the Native Americans, that black was enslaved because of that. And the only reason they could keep black people slaves is that they had to give them a mentality that they were less than somebody else. And that was one of those things that we grow up out of. So our culture had to change for that. The culture of being black was not just African, it was saying we need to create a culture that is us. So it came out of music, and it came out of teaching our kids and family and church. And it was all of those things created what we call blackness today.
All right, so how many kids do you have?
I have one child.
Yeah, one child.
Yeah.
So as a father of an biracial child, talk about how you approach being a parent.
I approach being a parent much like my father did. I believe in being self-sufficient. I try to teach my daughter as much about being prideful and being proud of who she is, no matter what people think. And sometimes it gets her in a little bit of trouble because she stands up for herself a lot. And sometimes I have to say, slow down. You can't fight like I did. Sometimes I have to warn her that she can't fight like I did because it's not seen as a good thing to do. And I have the reputation so that she doesn't have to anymore. And sometimes that streak comes back out. And but growing up with her, taught me that I had to be a little bit more gentle, and I had to teach a little bit more lessons rather than make her learn a lesson. And talking to her now as an adult, you know, we can sit down and have a conversation and talk about, remember that when I taught you that as a kid? Remember that when I taught you that as a kid? And she remembers those things. And it was me trying to say, you have to be a little hard. I'm not going to give you everything. And one of the things that I always preach to her is that I will give you everything that you need, and I will teach you how to get everything that you want.
That's powerful. Talk about a time when you had that kind of experience when you were black and teach you a little bit different.
Well, because I knew how I grew up and I didn't want her to grow up with that same mentality, she knew right away that, that there was something different about her because she was always around my father. My father was the first person that held her besides me and her mother in the hospital. And then when she came home, my grandfather was the second person to ever hold her as out of the hospital. So there was looking at black people right away, and growing up, you know, she had black friends and she had white friends, and those black friends, some of them were actually cousins of my cousins or children of my cousins. And, you know, it was always, you know, we have to have as many white babies and black babies in her bedroom. You know, she wasn't just going to play with just white babies because that was what was at Walmart. It was, we have to find other babies so that she can understand that there's a difference between this and that, because when it shows its ugly head and people pick apart the fact that she has a black parent or she has a black grandfather. If her grandfather came to see her at a concert and they said, "Oh, I didn't know your grandpa was black," we had to prepare for those things. And that was something that I don't think I was ever prepared for. It was just, I was told you need to defend yourself, you need to stand up for yourself, anybody calls you a name, so the lesson was a little bit stronger and a little bit more raw than my father taught me to teach her is, honey, you are black. You know, some people are gonna look at you and they're only gonna see black. Other people are gonna look at you and see white. Other people are gonna see you and see a biracial child. You have to be ready for all those things.
You said something that kind of stuck with me. You said you had to get black baby dolls even if all they had were white. Growing up in this area, was that an issue?
It's tough. It's tough to this day. Because, you know, the representation is not always there. You're not always going to be able to find, you know, dolls and toys that represent a black culture. If you go out and you buy a fire truck for a small kid right now, I can almost guarantee you the little figurines that are going to be in there are going to be white figurines. So you just have to be conscious of it. And really that's what, I mean, if you think about what blackness is, it's really a consciousness. You have to be conscious that you're black. You can't just say that you're black. You have to understand what black means to you, not to everybody else. Because someone might look at you and say, "Oh, well, yeah, I see he's black because of the way he wears his pants, or the way he wears his hat, or the way he wears, you know, his clothing." But if someone, you know, asks you questions, you have to understand that you have to be able to articulate what that means to you. And I have a lot of white friends. I have a lot of white family, and I have a lot of white business associates that I always have to explain, you can't say that around me. And they say, well, why can't I? You know, I was just joking. And I say, you have to understand your audience. I'm part of your audience, and if I'm in your audience, you can't act like that. So I'm just trying to teach through consciousness.
What is that like when you go against someone to protect yourself?
I love it now because I don't have to do it physically. You know, and I have so much, I guess, pride behind me, and you know, I'm standing on the backs of my forefathers to know that I'm defending them as well as me, and when I have to explain to my white friends that, you know, you can't look at a person just because they're this, or they might have a daughter that might be, you know, dating a black person, and I can tell that they're a little bit more critical of that person because they're black. And I say, listen, give him a chance. Give him a chance. He'll probably surprise you, because if you tell that person you can't do this, chances are they're going to prove it to you that they can't. But if you give them a chance, most likely they're going to prove to you that they can.
So you said
What being black means to me is, again, it's a consciousness. It's just understanding that I know that I have black blood running through me, which I have African blood running through me. I did my ancestry DNA, and I know that I'm 40-some% African. I have ancestry from Ghana, and I have ancestry from Cameroon, and I have ancestry from Senegal. And when you look at all those cultures, there's so much more to it. You just got to look into it. I remember being in college and reading a book called Before the Mayflower, and that's where the story of when we were kings. And you go back to Ethiopia, and there were pharaohs that were Ethiopian. And a lot of people look at people that are in Egypt and go, oh yeah, the pharaohs were Egyptian. They were African. They were African. And that's what being black to me means. If you know where you came from, you just have to understand that it's a little bit more than just the skin. My skin's lighter than most black people. But I'll tell you what, I can sit here and talk with any black person and feel just as black as they do.
As you should.
I do.
As you should, because the density of your blackness does not perpetuate how black you are.
That's so true.
I thought that was kind of normal.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the black community, it is a sense of normalcy.
Yeah, it's not normal, but it is normalized. It's normalized by our culture, and our culture is taught that. And the thing is that not only did black people lose on that cultural shift, white people lost too, because now they're only looked as white. So now they can't be proud that they're Italians. They can't be proud that they're Irish. They can't be proud that they're German. Carney can shed some light on this too, when Isabel Wilkerson talked about going to Germany. And she went over to Germany, and Germans had a great deal of humility coming out of Germany. You go to Germany and you don't see statues of Hitler, even though that was a great period in their life. I mean, they thought they were the best race in the world. Some of them did, but they were humiliated by that war. World War II really shed some light on things, and what that did is it opened up their eyes to, man, we can't act like this. We can't be like this. So when you go to Germany now, you can see that there's a pride of being German, and it has nothing to do with Nazis. It has nothing to do with that. And we need that in our own culture. We need to be proud of who we are, but we also need to be, humbled by our experiences. White people need to be humbled by their experience of trying to, dominate the Native Americans. White people need to be humbled by trying to dominate Africans, because that's the only way that they can become proud of who they are as a people. I think there's a lot of imposter mentality in our world, and a lot of that comes from our white brothers and sisters. And at the same time, our black brothers and sisters, have to, culturally appropriate as well, because we don't know what it means to be proud of who we are. We just stand up, we throw a fist in the air, and we think that that's what it means, and it really means more than that. I did AfricanAncestry.com years ago. My sister bought it for me for my birthday, probably about 10, 15 years ago. And it was very rudimentary. So basically it had a pie chart, and it showed you how black you were or how much African you were. And I have since done the AncestryDNA.com, and it's just a little bit more in depth, and it tells you what part of Africa you're from, and it tells you who in your family are you linked to, and it just gives you a little bit more detail about the regions that you come from, and a lot of things start to make sense. And we've done this throughout the past, and I think DNA tests like this can really shed a lot of light, but there's a lot of people that are afraid. They're afraid to find out who they really are. And there's a lot of people that say, oh yeah, I'm Cherokee Indian. And it's like, what? Where do you get that? And they just want to be so bad because we don't have an identity. And that's the one thing that we're lacking in America is culture, because now that's a piece of that humble pie. And it makes you a better person, because you have to look back and say, wow, man, we did some really horrible stuff. Whether it be you physically or your ancestors, we have to know that we did some horrible stuff so that we can move on and say, yep, I'll never break that again. I'll never be that person. And it's I think it's hard being an individual, but it's harder being a culture because you don't have control of the other people that perpetuate that culture. And I think you just have to embrace it and kind of shoo away the stuff that was negative in the past and look at it and say, well, how do we move on from this? How do we get better at this? I've been to Germany 3 times, and black people over there, white people over there, they all speak German. So we look at them as Germans. So it's something that's in their culture. They may dress a little bit differently. They may talk a little differently, but we're perceived as Americans here. They're perceived as Germans. You go to France, there's French black people, there's French white people, and they're perceived as French to us until you really get down to it. Because you can go to a hip hop club over in France and it's live, and you would never imagine it. And they're rapping in French. You know, I've been to Japan, and I saw Japanese people with hair tighter than yours. You know, curly as hard, because they were permanent on straws to make it so tight because they love black culture. So it's pretty amazing.
It's so crazy how in other cultures and other countries, black is received as almost like an honor and a privilege, whereas in America, it's truly taught as something that's to be feared and hated.
Yeah, and that's that humility, that humble pie we need to take on, because we separated ourselves during colonialism, and more so in the times of slavery. We needed that as a country to progress, I guess. Or that was the thought then, was that we needed to separate one person or one caste system from another, and the only way to do that was by color. It was by saying all black people are slaves, and that's why they separated the South and the North when it all started to come together, because the North was becoming more integrated with freedom, and the South just said, no, we have to keep this away, because they had the cotton trade. It was one of those things in our history where a lot of people don't like to look at. They don't even want to see it. They don't even want to know that it happened. And other people want to shed light on it, and I think that's the way to do it, is shed light on it so we can become humble and progress, and we can become these other countries that see their citizens as citizens.
We're finally taking down Christopher Columbus statues. We're finally moving in a direction where people who used to be revered are now being, villainized for the villains they truly were.
And you have people that are afraid of that.
And so it's funny you said, 'cause my question is, why do you think the people that are in power are so afraid of that?
Again, this Isabel Wilkerson was really talking about how we need to look at those things that we've done in the past and learn from them. And when you're taking down a statue, you need to learn why you're doing that. And it's not to forget your past. We all know we went through it, and that's where she really spun on the whole Germany thing. You can go to Germany, you're not going to see a statue of Hitler. Everyone knew he was a bad guy. We don't want to know that Columbus was a bad guy. We don't want to hear the story that Columbus was a bad guy. So when we're taking down the statue of General Lee, we go, whoa, he was a great leader. Well, he was a great leader for people that were fighting for something that we're all against. If those people still want slavery now, then yeah, keep General Lee up. But guess what? He's going down in my neighborhood.
What is your take on people who still wave the Confederate flag, especially Northerners who wave the Confederate flag?
I think a lot of it is misguided. A lot of people want to claim that it's Southern pride, and for some of them, I guess you could. I mean, I watched the Dukes of Hazzard growing up, and I didn't think that Bo and Luke Duke were racist. There wasn't a white person in Hazzard County, or there wasn't a black person in Hazzard County, but I didn't particularly look at them as being racist. That was truly being, but people that fly the flag in your face, they're trying to do it for a reason. They're trying to do it to say, I'm better than you. And, for that reason, I think that a lot more white people need to stand up and say, you need to take that flag down. Why should we, as black people, tell them to take the flag down? You need more white people to stand up and say, I don't agree with you. We are a free people, and that is my free black brother. The whole problem is that and why I said it's misguided is that they're flying the flag to say how white I am. You know, because, and they're trying to be counterculture. They're trying to say, you know what, I don't like the way that those black people do that thing. So I'm going to be, you know, so I'm gonna dive into country music. I'm gonna dive into, you know, waving this flag. I'm gonna dive into cowboy boots. I'm gonna dive into, so they try to do just the opposite, just so that they can be the opposite. When in fact, really, they're not really white. They are a nationality as well. And if they look into the nationality, I guarantee you a lot of them do have black genes. A lot of them have Italian genes. And there's no Italian that ever owned a slave. They weren't even over here at that time. So when you look at it, they're probably looking at it and saying, man, I wasn't British. I didn't come from England. And you know, a lot of that stuff is, again, it's misguided because they just don't know. So they're very, in the greatest sense of the word, they're being ignorant. And I made the mistake of, I was having this conversation with one of my good friends a few months ago, and I had said, you know, when we came in, I was talking about the whole, you know, white and black was created out of the colonialism of America. And I said, you know, when people came over here, they were German and they had slaves and they were there, and he corrected me, and I was like, you know what, I just spoke because I was just trying to pull white cultures. I was trying to pull white nationalities out of my mentals, and I made the mistake, and he corrected me, and I was like, well, thank you, man. You know, and I knew that Italians didn't have slaves because they didn't get over here until 1600 or something like that, and I didn't know the exact date, but he corrected me on it. I was like, thank you, I appreciate that, and I was humbled by that, just saying, you know what, I misspoke, and I'm sorry I misspoke, and he didn't take offense to it, but he had the guts to, you know, stick up for us because he is Italian. So he doesn't look at himself as white. He looks at himself as Italian, and you know, has me over for dinner all the time. And he has one of my good friends that is also a black woman over for dinner all the time, and we all hang out together. His wife happens to be Korean. It's a United Nations of sorts. If you were to go to a family that is from India, they have an Indian culture. You know, Native Americans have a Native American culture. You know, you go to a black person's house or a black family's house on Sundays, you have a family culture, but you don't have true culture. And I think it takes nations to do that, and not just being a nationality, because again, it's all tribalism. And you know, when it becomes so small, we just have, this is my group of friends, this is my tribe. And you really don't know who you are except for that. Once you get a little bit bigger, you can say, you get the collective together and say, we are this. And that's why, you know, you look at a place like Ireland, they're so proud to be Irish. It's a small country and it has, you know, has a lot of people in it, but yet they all have a certain culture. They all do certain things at certain times. And we lack that in America. We're so diverse that it's almost a negative for us. And I think we need to find out who we really are.
I also think that it's not positive in America to celebrate our culture.
It's not. They call it cultural appropriation.
Yeah, American culture took Cinco de Mayo, which is a Mexican holiday,
right,
and turned it into an excuse to get wasted.
Well, most people don't even understand what Cinco de Mayo. They know it's the 5th of May, but they don't know that it was the fight for El Pueblo.
I said this to John, these conversations are so important.
I was so happy to have Carney ask me to be a part of this, because it meant that he understood that we understand each other. And that understanding is more than anything. It's like whenever I see him, and I mean, yes, I cut his hair, but I've seen him grow up. I've seen him grow up from a youth. And you see a person go through these phases in their life, and you say, man, I'm proud to know that man. Proud to know who he's become and who he's becoming. And it makes me feel good about who I was being as a representative of our culture. You know, he might have looked at me and I didn't know what he was thinking at any time, but I would do these speeches to basketball teams. I would talk to the St. Bonaventure basketball team, and I would say, you know, these kids, they're watching you at all times. They want to dress like you. They want to talk like you. They want their hair cut like you. They want to be everything you are. Act like you know they're watching, because I know you don't know they're watching, because they're watching when you think they don't even see you. And you know, hopefully I do that for people like Carney and the like. I mean, I'm just talking people that are younger than me, not people that are not on my education level or anything like that, because I don't look at myself as older or wiser than anybody in my peer group, because I think we can all learn from each other. But I just hope that as I was out there 20 years ahead, that someone can look at me and say, wow, I want to be like that brother.
You know, but that's the beautiful thing about wisdom is that wisdom comes from experience, it doesn't come from age.
Absolutely.
Even though technically the longer you are alive, you do experience more, but that doesn't mean your experiences were positive.
Right.
It's something that should be revered.
I have a lot of negative things that happened to me in my life, and I turned them around. I turned them around as a positive. You know, it meant a lot to me to say I've righted that wrong, or I've ate that piece of humble pie that made me go, I won't let that happen again. And I try every single time, and I fail all the time, but at least I'm willing to admit that I'm wrong, and I'm willing to admit that, you know what, I'm going to try harder next time.
Getting back to these questions, what were some of the struggles of raising a black daughter?
Some of the struggles were really about parenting as a whole. It was trying to take my experiences and put them on the back burner. So, you know, my experiences as an adolescent black male were that I was going to be told that I couldn't date a white girl in this town. And I knew that, you know, raising a black daughter, I had to be sensitive to those things so that I didn't just jump the gun and say, no, I know how people are gonna act, I know how people are gonna be, so therefore I have to put a stop to this, or I have to let this go. I had to really be sensitive to it. So it just made me open up my eyes and say, I can't judge by what happened to me what's gonna happen to you. I just would reiterate to her, this happened to me, please don't let it happen to you.
That's powerful. Can you give us just some examples?
I guess the toughest thing is that, and the biggest example would be when she became the age to date. Her mother and I never stopped her from dating anyone outside of her culture or outside of her race. Obviously she's mixed race, so it was really hard to put a limitation on any of that. It was just, we had to be sensitive to knowing that if she went to someone's house and they acted a certain way, or they prayed at the dinner table, and or they ate dinner together. I'm a hairdresser. I don't get home until 8:30 at night, 9 o'clock at night sometimes. So a lot of times we didn't even eat dinner together. And I had to understand that not every family was like our family. Not every family had the same type of attitudes about living their life as we did. So it was just trying to be sensitive about that. And it was hard. It was hard because I always wanted to be a certain type of father. And the way that I worked, or the profession that I chose, forced me to kind of, you know, struggle. And it was a struggle because I didn't want to be looked at as that black dad that never showed up to the games, because my dad never did, you know. But my mom never did either. So I guess I can't look at it and say my black dad never showed up, because my white mom never showed up either. You know, I had my black pastor cousin and his wife come to my exceptional seniors basketball game in high school, and they represented me and put my rose on, put my corsage on me, and I was proud to have them there, and it was an awesome experience. And then my mom showed up late. So, you know, it's just one of those things. I just tried to, you know, raise my daughter and know that I was always going to be at her graduation. I was always going to be at her games. And even if I had to, you know, cut hair and then all of a sudden dip out, you know, a little late, I was going to be there. I was going to make sure I showed up, and I did that.
What were some of like your internal struggles that you faced being a black guy? How old were you when you father?
Wow. When I had Selena, I was 26 years old. So I wasn't a young father. I was pretty conscious of what I wanted to be. I wanted to have a profession before I had any children, and I made the conscious decision to not have any more children after I had her, too, because I know how tough it is to grow children in this day and age, and it's getting harder and harder. You know, times are changing. I can only imagine what these kids are going to be going through after being through a pandemic that I never got to see. You know, I never got to experience a war like my father, and you know, being an adult and going through a pandemic, I don't know how I would feel if I was a child and going through that same thing, and knowing that I had to wear a mask for, you know, 3 years straight, and not to see other people's lips, and not to see people's smiles, and not to see people or hear people talk and see their lips move the same way. You know, there's a lot of struggles that all these kids are going to go through, and it just compounds the fact that growing up as an African American, we already have struggles that are based on the culture that we lack or the culture that we see, and throwing this stuff on top of it makes it even worse. It was a weird disease because it affected so many people differently, and I think, you know, the black community needed to, you know, wake up too and realize that, you know, diabetes is there, and hypertension is there, and there's a lot of other diseases that compound what COVID would do to you, and if you didn't pay attention to it, it could be your death sentence. You know, it's bad already that we have these other things that, you know, not seen by other cultures that are prevalent in the black community, and having COVID on top of that really exacerbated the whole problem.
What would you tell your 10-year-old self about being black?
My 10-year-old self.
What was your 10-year-old black self like? Answer that one first.
I was a wild boy.
Word.
Yeah.
Define wild.
Well, I guess that's a time in my life where my parents separated when I was 11. So I saw a lot of bad stuff going on when I was 8, 9, and 10 that led up to that. So that's when I became very rebellious, acting up in school, you know, showing out just because, fighting a lot. And it was just anger that I misguided anger, didn't know where I was going. And I guess what I would tell my 10-year-old self is, this too shall pass.
Why that?
Because I know it was a phase. You know, I've gone through a lot of phases, and that was one of those phases where I was like, did I need to be so angry? Did I need to be so hostile against other people? Did I need to act up at school just because I wanted attention, you know, that I wasn't getting from either one of my parents at home? Was I angry that we moved in, you know, 3 or 4 houses in a period of 2 years, 7 houses over the course of my adolescence, and didn't know who I should be mad at. You know, I was mad at the world, and so I would tell my 10-year-old self is, just wait. Just wait. Good things are going to come eventually. You just got to be patient.
What's your take on that angry black man?
Again, it's misguided anger. We just don't understand how to, you know, where to put it. And I think I was. I had the same thing, and I would say I'm mad, and I'm mad at my father, and I'm mad at my mother, and I happen to be black. And in the midst of it, I still got to deal with racism. I still got to, you know, deal with people thinking that I'm a lower class citizen than them just because I got a nappy headed fro and I look a little different than them. And it's misguided for a lot of people because they don't understand really why it's coming at them. And I felt the same way. I just needed to lash out to protect myself. And I think it's justifiable if you look at it that way, but if I could sit down with anyone and talk to them, I would tell them that it is misguided. you're gonna do this at this time, but you're gonna look back eventually and say, man, maybe I should have gone the other way. I look back now and I look at all the people that I fought over racism, and I thought, they still don't like black people. They still don't like black people. And I won every single fight, and they still don't like black people. So why did I do it? Because it didn't make me feel any better. It made me feel more angry. So why did I have to do that? Now, it's good that I have a reputation and I don't have to fight for that same reason, and I can use my mind and talk a person out of believing that they're better than me, and understanding that, wow, I'm standing across the table or standing across the room from a person who I should not hate because of what he looks like. I should not hate him. I guess I didn't know who he was. And if I can shed light on that, that's much easier than me trying to get into a fight with them to change their mind.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much of the angry black man still lives in you to this day?
It depends on how many drinks I have in me.
You know, it's so funny to say that, because I say this to you all the time, I'm like, bro, sometimes I don't know which version of me you're gonna get when you get me drunk. So you keep trying to get me drunk.
Right.
If I get into a fight, it's only because some white person looks at me the wrong way.
Yeah.
You better bail me out. He's like, bro,
I got you.
I'm like, all right, cool. I don't really know him around town.
It's so true though, because, you know, that's that part of, you know, you can slip out of these things. You said, what did you call it? Code switching. I mean, that's part of code switching. You know, you take yourself onto a different mentality when you're under the influence of anything. You could be under the influence of weed. You can be under the influence of alcohol. You can be under the influence of love. You can be under the influence of anger. And the only way you can cure one emotion is by masking it with another emotion. It can be powerful. You know?
Talk about how you and Ryan met.
Well, we met, Ryan was a young kid and getting his hair cut for what, maybe 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around there, maybe even earlier than that. Yeah. His mother knew who I was growing up because I played basketball with his uncles. So his mom knew who I was as a hairdresser and wanted to bring him to somebody that could deal with his type of hair. And that's really what it all starts from. And that's how a lot of people meet me. And you know, once I start doing a person's hair, if we develop a camaraderie, it lasts a lifetime. You know, it's one of those things where I don't look at what I do and say, I do hair, I do people. You know, I would hate hair if that's all I did. So I work with people, and I think Ryan and I see eye to eye on a lot of things. We're both basketball players. He was much better than me. He was a football player, I was a football player. I don't want to ever say what receiving yards I ever gained, because his would outclass mine by far, but I understand where he got that, and I understand where he went with it, and you know, it's just cool to see someone like him grow up, and see a lot of people like him grow up, and know that he came from here. And you know, when you're stuck in Olean physically, you don't have to be mentally. And that's one of the things that I tell all these kids, is that you don't have to be stuck here. You know, people say, oh, there's nothing to do here, it's a small town. Say, get out. Get out of this small town. I think a lot of military, you know, especially nowadays, my grandfather was in a segregated battalion in the Army, and then my father was in, you know, Vietnam, fought in Vietnam. And after Vietnam, I think a lot of black people that came from cities and went into the military and got into battalions with country white boys and learned a lot that, you know what, we're brothers. You know, it's the term respect really comes to my mind when I think about things like that, because a man will go into battle and fight and die for his brother that is not his brother.
100%.
And it doesn't matter if he's white, black, Hispanic, Asian American, Asian, it doesn't matter. It's his brother. and they'll fight that that's a code or an honor. So in that sense, we do have a culture, but it's a military culture.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, when you're facing life or death, the world gets real small.
Yes, it does.
And understanding the severity of being given the right to take a life, and also watch the lives of those you care about dwindle in front of your eyes. When you understand that severity, nothing else matters.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. The problem is that when people see each other for the first time, they make an impression, or they take an impression. You know, they take an imprint of you and say, that's this type of person. If you were to walk into a room, automatically a person will take a snapshot of who you are. You know, now, give them the opportunity to change your mind. Most people don't do that. They automatically go, no, I don't like that type of person. It's like, well, what do you mean? What type of person? You know, you either have to say that type of person that dresses like that, you have to say that type of person that looks like that type of person that wears their hair like that type of person that wears their, you know, you take that snapshot. And this is one of the things that I've learned over the years is that growing a business in a town like this, I had to realize that I couldn't be as outwardly spoken as I am today. I am so comfortable in my skin today that I can wear earrings, I can shave my head, I can have a 1-foot beard on my chin, I can do anything that I want, I can dress in anything, I can wear hats, I can go without a hat. I can do that now because I've already created that impression. So when people see me now, they already know that I'm a certain person. When I was growing, I had to calm it down a little bit because I would realize that if I was going to be charging a 50-year-old woman or a 65-year-old woman, you know, $150 to $250 to $350 for a service, I could not dress like a bum. And what I meant by that is I had to be more professional than I was until I got there. And now that I'm there, I can do whatever I want because my reputation precedes me. Before, it's not a reputation. What it is a perception. And if you take that perception and you turn it into reputation, you can do whatever you want. The obvious things are music. You know, music could be different. The way black people worship could be perceived as different.
Because black people worship.
Oh yeah, black people worship. Black people worship.
They don't go to church and sit there for 2 hours and then say amen and get up and walk away.
Listen, we used to every Sunday we used to call Up on the Hill, which is at the bottom of this hill. There's a cemetery. My grandfather's buried there. My father's buried there. It's a military cemetery, and at the top of that hill was my grandfather's house that he built. And when my grandfather passed away, actually, let me back up. Every Sunday, we used to have a barbecue up there. And every single Sunday, all the family members, all the cousins, and we'd go up on the hill and we'd hang out. And I mean, for hours and hours, and all my uncles would drink beers and hang out, and they'd play dominoes, and we would play, you know, games like Consequences, and just the kids would run around. And my grandfather had a grapevine that all the kids were told to stay out of, and you'd get a whooping if you were in his grapes. And it was some of the best times of my life. And then my grandfather died, and he was the patriarch of the family, and my grandmother married the church. So every Sunday, there was no more Sundays up on the hill. It was grandma went to church because that was her healing. You know, that was what she needed, and you know, that was her worship. And she gave her life to her husband as long as he lived. And then once he passed, she gave her life to the Lord. And it was powerful for her because it kept her alive, but it made all of us kind of like scatter and find our new life on Sundays. And you know, we needed to find new places of worship.
What was your influences on Carney's blackness?
My influences? Whew. You know what, I think, maybe I'm speaking out of school, but I think in this town, sports is real big when it comes to how you grow up. And you know, we had a team back in the day. a basketball team that was perceived as real tough. I mean, we were a real good team that only had 2 black kids on it, myself and another kid, and it was the era right out of Michael Jordan and right after the LA Lakers and that, so our shorts got a little baggier and our swagger got a little bit, deeper, and we would carry ourselves a little bit more black as a team, because we didn't let people push us over just because we were a small little town that had to go up against these big teams from Buffalo and from outside of the area. And it was, I think that shed a lot of light on not only Carney, but a lot of other kids that were from the generations underneath us. And it was just how we carried ourselves, the way we dressed. I mean, I grew up as a poor kid, but I was voted best dressed in high school with no money because I had a way of carrying myself. I had a way of dressing. And I mean, to this day, I'm a little older, so I can't dress as flashy, but I can wear hats at any time and never look out of place. I don't wear glasses, but I have about 60 pairs of glasses, and they're all fashion glasses. That none of them have prescriptions. So I think in the fashion world and in the sports world, I was an impressionable person on a lot of the black kids that are from this area. Not only Carney, but all of his colleagues and counterparts.
Talk about one of your favorite memories of Carney.
Probably my favorite memories are watching him on the football field, doing things that I didn't think anyone could do. When someone goes up for a football that you got 2 or 3 defenders on you and you come out of the pack, because you rose up over everybody. I'm like, man, I wish I had them hops. Back in the day, I could dunk back in the day, but only if I had a free lane. I wasn't going to jump through 3 people and get it on them. So those are some of my fondest memories because I was proud to see him grow up because I knew his uncles and I knew his mom, and I know how it is to grow up with a single parent and struggle with your identity. And that was something I never had to preach to him, but it was something that I knew he was going through because we all went through it. And if he knew anything, it was that I was always going to be there. If he needed someone to talk to, I was always going to be there because all he had to do was come to the shop and sit down in my chair, and he was going to get positive words. I don't think he's ever seen me angry. I don't think he's ever seen me in a down mood, and I think that's impressionable, especially on a young kid. Hope he can use some of this.
These are going to be long for sure.
No, it's all good. This is great because I don't think he's ever heard me speak about a lot of this stuff. Because I mean, it's not something you really need to talk about, but you need to hear it.
Yeah, it's very cathartic. I think for me as someone younger than all of you guys, but also like for yourself too. Just to be able to, share your thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I've been on stage for almost 20 years. Talking hair and talking about how my experiences growing up doing hair and being who I am as a person, but that's just me as a person. But when you're talking about culture and you're talking about how I was a role model for this person or doing that, it's like, I guess I never really thought that deeply about it. I just tried to be, rather than try to think, oh, here's my plan. It's like I knew that I would train myself like I would talk to those basketball players. Always act as if someone's watching. Always act as if someone is there and you can't see them, but someone's watching. So what you do, in the light, someone's always watching.
Have you heard his song, Dear Black Man?
Oh yeah. And I'll tell you this too, when the album dropped, I told him I liked it. I texted him and he texted me back and he said, hey, was there anyone in particular that you really liked? I love any type of feedback is good. And it took me a millisecond to say, Dear Black Man. And I said, because that's me. I felt it. I felt that song. Those things resonate with me because those are the experiences of us black men in this small community. But Dear Black Man, obviously, I felt his pain going through that struggle of not understanding his identity until he was 18 years old, whereas I learned mine early on, but yet I didn't really understand how to verbalize it. I just went through it emotionally, and it was tough because I went so many years before I could say, all right, I found my identity. I love the fact that he found it through music, because I don't have a musical bone in my body. I can vibe with it, but I don't have a musical bone in my body. You put a pair of scissors or clippers in my hands, I can breathe through that. But that's my instrument. And to see someone do it through music, it's refreshing. It's refreshing to see that, you know, I can sit here and see him in a suit and tie and celebrate business, and at the same time be able to jump on the mic and really let raw emotion come out and go, that's the same person I know. It's the same person I see in me. So Dear Black Man really meant that to me, is that, you know, he's talking to himself in the past tense and saying, you know what, I wish I knew you then. And it's powerful. And that's huge. When people question your character and they have nothing, they don't know anything about you, I think that's where the anchor comes from, because you're like, how dare you? How dare you tell me I'm not something? How dare you tell me I'm not this? And I think, you know, sometimes saying that in a song, you know, saying that in a rap lyric, it's some of the most powerful things, because now it's like dropping a bomb. You know, you can set that timer and go, just wait until someone hears that lyric. Just wait until someone gets this. You know, it's like, you know, if I were to, you know, speak into a voicemail to somebody and say, hey man, I just wanted to let you know I love you. You know, I gotta wait for that person to answer the call and go, oh man, that was really cool for that person to say that. And I never pause when I have a feeling and I want to say, you know, hey man, I love you. You know, really, I love you. You're my brother. I'll never pause when I have that feeling. I'll never go, man, I sound too much like a punk. Never, because I know I'm not. So I'm gonna let that emotion shine through, and I'm gonna make sure it works. I'm gonna make sure it's powerful to that person.
Black man, it's nice to finally meet you. Can't wait to tell you about the things I've been through. 18 years, I was walking by myself. Ain't no fucking way that could be good for my health. Skeletons go deep. Been living in my closet. Fear of the unknown cause a nigga to be modest. I'm just being honest. It's hard to face the facts that I've been living all this time, not knowing what it mean to be black. Grew up.
When I first heard this, I was in my car. And I don't know where I was driving, but I immediately, when I heard that first hook, I was like, it caught me. And I immediately knew I was gonna like this song. I didn't know what the lyrics were gonna be, but I just felt like, man, now he's speaking to me. He's speaking directly to me. And it was powerful when he said, waiting 18 years. I was like, man, that's a long time not to know who you are, you know. And so many of us go through that, and and you don't have to be black or white or any color to wait a long time to really find out who you are. But it's even harder when you have a cultural thumb on you that doesn't allow you to be you, because it's already pushing you in a certain way. So that was real powerful for me right off the bat.
Ain't have no father, just my mother. Her and Graham's the only ones at supper. So many fucking questions, things to discover. Why these white kids always questioning my color? Start to make me wonder, who the hell am I? Why they got me feeling like my brown skin is my demise? You can see it in my eyes, confusion run deep. Start to lose trust, can't tell a wolf from a sheep. Inside the tears leak, can't show it on the surface. Was just a little kid trying to understand his purpose. Tears turned to rage, on fear I turned the page. Smoked my first L, now I'm coping with the haze. Why the value of my life under appraise?
In that instance, it brings me back to growing up, playing sports. And again, I said we came out of that culture of you know, the Michael Jordan era, and freshly, I've been a Laker fan my whole life, and so I was Byron Scott and Magic Johnson and Kareem and Michael Cooper and in that era. But Michael Jordan was more of an icon at that time when I was playing basketball, and I remember, you know, people yelling from the sidelines, and it's even worse now, but yelling from the sidelines back in, you know, in the mid to late 80s, 22, pull your shorts up. 20, and because I wore my shorts baggy, and I wore black sneakers and was showing an outward impression of who I wanted to be, and I was trying to emulate these other players that were in the league, and I was getting ridiculed as a, you know, 15 and 16-year-old kid for doing what an adult does on the court. I was just trying to emulate that, and knowing, you know, sitting here listening to these lyrics, it's like, I know that he was going through that same thing. It's like you can't be who you really are because you're just trying to be a kid. You're just trying to grow up in this world that it already is putting their thumb on you and telling you can't do something. And the only people that got your back is your mom and your grandmother or whoever is your tight-knit family. And you know, it was powerful to me to, you know, to listen that, you know, having a single parent, knowing that your mom is raising you, and I went through that same thing. You know, I was a latchkey kid. My mom worked in a factory, and it was me, my younger sister who's 3 years younger than me, my brother who's 3 years younger than her, and you know, we basically came home, made our own food, and because she was out making, you know, payments for the bills to keep the lights on, and when you throw on that the things that you're getting yelled at by other adults, and you're not allowed to date, and you're not allowed to do this and do that just because of who you are, it speaks.
Just cause my skin dark, why the 5 o'clock news only show niggas in chalk? Why I can't just be myself, always gotta play the part like, boy, you black, you ain't supposed to be smart. Nigga, dead black man, it's nice to finally meet you. Can't wait to tell you about the things I've been through. 18 years, I was walking by myself. Ain't no fucking way that could be good for my health. Skeletons go deep, been living in my closet. Fear of the unknown, cause a nigga to be modest. I'm just being honest, it's hard to face the facts that I've been living all this time, not knowing what it mean to be black. It's hard to run with your mans if you ain't walking they shoes. Know that niggas ain't blind, but still might not see your views. Call me Detective Carney, always looking for clues. Can't swim, but never hesitate to dive in the booze. Yeah, first place I ever found some answers. Uncle Deuce, the first to ever put me on the Panthers. And what it's like to be a black man in a white man's world. And why they calling me nigga when I fuck a white man's girl. Yeah, I swear Tupac was like my pops. Me against the world, forced my mind outside that box. Kids felt like my...
Another verse that was real powerful, because, you know, growing up, being black, like I said earlier, every black girl that was around here was also a relative of mine. So there was no one to date in your race, so you were forced to date outside your race. And when you date someone and their parents don't like you at their house, or they don't like you talking to their daughter on the phone, or they say, who are you talking to? And they say, oh, tell him to stay with his own kind. It digs deep, and it stings. It stings real bad. And I remember one incident when I was in high school, and I dated a girl whose father was a judge. And her grandmother actually told me, go find someone that's like you. And all I was trying to do was love somebody. And I cried, and obviously that relationship never worked out, but it was, I was fearful of getting into relationships because I was always going to be looked at a certain way without without ever making a second impression. So listening to that again, I mean, this whole song, it spoke volumes to me, because it was almost like I was experiencing it all over again just through his lyrics.
Cause soon as a nigga heard the locks, once I started peeping game, it was too hard for me to stop. Just too hard for MTV, not black enough for BET. Just let me be, that hit my soul, nigga. Older brothers dying cold, nigga. This rap shit really kept me out that hole, I swear. Dear black man, it's nice to finally meet you. Can't wait to tell you about the things I've been through. 18 years, I was walking by myself. Ain't no fucking way that could be good for my health. Skeletons go deep. Been living in my closet. Fear of the unknown cause a nigga to be modest. I'm just being honest. It's hard to face the facts that I've been living all this time. I knowing what it mean to be black.
I think when you encompass this whole song, it's an embodiment of this whole growing up in a small town and being black and being surrounded by just a sea of whiteness, and always being the token in any category, whether you're the only black person on your basketball team, whether you're the only black person on your football team, whether you're the only black person at dinner, whether you're the only black person in any of your groups that are outside of school. You almost have to take on your own representation. You have to find yourself. I think he embodied that in the song, and it's. I told him right off the bat, it's my favorite song on the record, and because it speaks to me as a person, speaks to me as a black person, speaks to me as a young man. Even though I'm not a young man anymore, it does speak volumes. The last thing that I caught in that verse, and I remember it like it was yesterday when I first heard it, was he started talking about, the first time he heard the locks. And I came up in the era of Run DMC and LL Cool J and MC Shan and Biz Markie and the early rap groups, that came in the early 80s and mid 80s, and it was almost like I had someone speaking for me. So when I was going through my struggles, I dipped into music. It was music and sports that kept me out of more trouble. The trouble that I did get in was because I couldn't control my anger and I couldn't control my impulsiveness. But when I could, I dipped into music. I would sit home and cry and listen to LL Cool J's I Need Love at night, and it always felt like I needed someone to calm me down. And it was always music that got me through it. And then sports and music, they almost intertwine. It's like you go out and you do warm-ups and you listen to your favorite tracks, and it was always, it was me, another black dude on the team that his father was a pastor, and all white dudes, and all we listened to was hip hop. The whole team, because I was a leader, and me and one of my boys that was also a leader. It was like we grew up listening. Yo, check this out. Listen to this. I remember we went to the music store and bought a. I can't remember what song it was. Oh, it was it was Kumo D's "Go See the Doctor," and it was a single. And we sat there listening to it on a tape, and listened to it over and over. And we sat in one sitting and finally knew all the words, and we couldn't let his parents hear it. And it's so funny because I remember, my parents and my father and my uncles talking about listening to old Richard Pryor albums in the basement of their parents' house, and hiding it so that if the record, so that the record didn't skip and make a bunch of noise. And I was doing the same thing with rap lyrics because they were explicit. And it was 7th grade, 8th grade, listening to this stuff that was powerful to us, but was blasphemy to the parents that were going to kill us if they found out that we were listening to it. brings it all back. Yeah, it's, thank you. Thank you.